Grant came back with Bridget beside him, a suitcase in one hand, champagne in the other, and a box of cabinet pulls beneath her arm. He opened the door and stepped inside with the ease of a man expecting the place to be empty. The living room was still mine. The kitchen was still mine. And every sample Bridget had left behind was gone. His clothes were packed in the room by the entry, with an envelope resting on the largest bag. Bridget walked into the kitchen and stopped when she saw the cabinet doors my mother had helped me choose. "Where is everything?" she breathed, while Grant turned toward me and demanded to know why I had ruined his plans. Jocelyn Price stood beside me as I placed a printed copy of Grant's message on the table. It confirmed he had moved in with Bridget, ordered me out, and told me to leave every key so she would never wait outside. Bridget read that line twice, then looked at Grant as if the floor had shifted beneath her. Before he could answer, his phone rang, and the voice from the county office carried clearly enough for us to hear. He was being removed from field inspections while several contractor emails were reviewed, though no one used the word fired. Bridget lowered the box and asked, "Was any of it true?" while Grant stared at the pickup schedule he had signed. He had opened the door, but that was the only part of his promised life that still worked. The kitchen was gone. His belongings were waiting, and the woman beside him now held the full version of what he had hidden. Jocelyn did not threaten him, and I did not raise my voice, because the documents had answered every question he wanted to turn into an argument. Grant stood in the house he had called his, understanding that access was not ownership, and confidence was not permission. A few days earlier, Grant sat across from me at dinner with his phone face down beside his plate and announced that Bridget would be moving in after their weekend away. He did not ask for a divorce or search for a careful way to begin, because he had already divided the house, the rooms, and my remaining time without me. "You need to be out before we get back," he said, then added that I should only take what belonged to me. I looked around the dining room and asked whether he meant another apartment. But Grant answered, "I mean this house." He leaned back and explained that years of repairs had given him a claim, as though choosing contractors had quietly rewritten the deed. "Bridget needed a clean beginning," he continued, "and she should not have to live among things that made her feel trapped inside someone else's marriage." That was when I noticed our wedding photograph lying face down beneath the sideboard instead of standing on the shelf where it had been that morning. Beside the kitchen doorway sat a leather sample bag with Bridget Colburn's name printed across the front. Grant followed my eyes and admitted Bridget had come inside while I was working so she could measure the kitchen and choose new cabinet finishes. "It doesn't matter now," he said, because in his version of events I was already gone, even while my dinner cooled in front of me. The bag rested beside the cabinet doors my mother had helped me select, and several samples were marked for removal and replacement. I asked when he planned to leave, keeping my voice level because the evidence in the room already said more than anger could. He claimed he had moved clothes and essentials into Bridget's apartment and would stay there until I finished packing. I asked him to put every instruction in writing so neither of us could later pretend the conversation had gone differently. Grant picked up his phone and sent a message confirming that I had to leave, that he was living with Bridget, and that every key should remain on the kitchen counter. He ended with, "She shouldn't have to wait outside a house that's about to be ours." The smile on his face appeared before the message reached my phone, because he believed a written deadline would make me obedient. I read the words again, then photographed Bridget's sample bag without moving anything inside it. Grant left the table to call her, speaking softly from the hallway while the wedding picture remained face down behind him. For the first time that night, I understood he had not simply chosen another woman. He had promised her a home he had never owned. The morning after Grant left with Bridget, an email arrived confirming delivery of kitchen cabinets to my address. Bridget Colburn appeared as the purchaser. Grant was listed as the approving homeowner, and the installation note ordered the existing cabinet doors removed before delivery. I read that line twice, because those doors were the ones my mother had helped me choose before she died. The schedule was set for the morning after Grant's deadline for me to leave. I forwarded the email to Darlene Whitlock, the coworker who reviewed vendor invoices and noticed details others skipped. She called within minutes and explained that Bridget had used an employee trade discount requiring her to certify the project as legitimate. We did not contact the showroom or search anyone's account. We only placed the delivery date beside Grant's message and the photograph of Bridget's sample bag. The dates showed the kitchen had been planned before Grant sat across from me at dinner. I opened the cabinet where we kept insurance records and found the deed transferring the house to me from my grandmother before the marriage. My name stood alone on the ownership documents, while Grant appeared only as a contact on repair receipts because he dealt with contractors. In an electrical folder, I found an email he had sent from his county account to Calvin Rhodes, asking for a faster appointment and a better price for work at the house. At the bottom, Grant mentioned another project Calvin was waiting to have inspected. I did not send that email to Grant's supervisor because I did not yet know whether it crossed a professional line. Instead, I quietly gathered the deed, the delivery notice, Grant's messages, and the contractor email, then carried everything to family attorney Jocelyn Price. She read Grant's confirmation that he had moved in with Bridget before examining anything else. "This matters," she said, tapping the sentence where he ordered me to leave every key behind. The strongest evidence was not something I uncovered in secret. It was everything Grant had written because he believed I would obey. Jocelyn confirmed that the house was my separate property because my grandmother had transferred it to me before the marriage, and Grant's name had never been added to the deed. Then she stopped me before relief became a mistake, explaining that ownership did not let me change the locks, remove his belongings, or block his access without authority. Grant had lived there throughout our marriage, so one move could turn a property record into a fight over unlawful exclusion. "We do this carefully," she told me, closing the deed and reaching for his message. She filed for divorce, requested exclusive use of the house, and sent Grant an agreement allowing him to collect property on a fixed schedule. The request rested on the deed, the apartment he had claimed as his residence, and his plan to move Bridget into a home he did not own. Jocelyn notified the showroom that no demolition, delivery, or installation had been authorized at my address. By that afternoon, the cabinet order was suspended because the owner had refused access. Grant called as soon as his lawyer forwarded the papers, insisting that years of repairs gave him the right to decide who lived there. I did not argue about every receipt, because Jocelyn had explained that contributions could be reviewed during the divorce without changing the deed. "Send every claim through counsel," I answered, and he laughed as if the paperwork were only a delay. He signed the property pickup schedule anyway, then added that he was doing it because Bridget had waited long enough for me to stop interfering. Bridget contacted me after the showroom froze her order and warned me not to drag her job into a private dispute. I replied that I had rejected work ordered for my property without consent, then sent the page naming Grant as the approving homeowner. She did not apologize, but her next message asked why my name was still the only one on the deed. The first consequence had not come from a scene or accusation. It came from an order that could not move forward once the truth reached the person responsible for approving it. Bridget did not leave Grant when she learned the house was mine, because too much of her future depended on his version of it. She asked whether he could force a sale or claim the property through divorce, and he told her Jocelyn was using paperwork to scare me. Then he photographed the page showing his scheduled pickup time and sent it as proof that I had agreed to let him return. He left out every page explaining that he had established another residence and could enter only under the limits he signed. Bridget wanted to believe him, but the showroom manager advised her to speak with counsel before explaining the suspended order. Her attorney requested the complete agreement, and the missing pages showed Grant had confirmed he was living elsewhere, accepted restricted access, and could not bring another person inside. They also showed he had moved essential belongings into Bridget's apartment, contradicting his claim that he was staying only a few nights. "Why did you send one page?" she asked. and Grant answered that the rest was routine language she would not understand. Meanwhile, Calvin Rhodes contacted the county's compliance office after rereading Grant's email about a faster appointment and a better price. Calvin did not accuse him of threats. He simply provided the message where Grant's private request appeared beside a project waiting for inspection. The county opened a review to determine whether Grant had used his position for personal benefit. So the first step was verification, not punishment. I knew nothing about Calvin's decision until Grant called and demanded to know why I had sent his emails to his supervisor. "I didn't contact your office," I told him, and the silence that followed lasted longer than his accusation. Grant knew exactly which message might trouble them. Even though I had never named Calvin or described the email, Bridget heard enough to ask how many choices he planned to blame on me before admitting he had made them himself. She still returned to the house with him, but she carried the complete agreement instead of the single page he had chosen. Grant entered the house during the time listed in the agreement, carrying champagne while Bridget held the box of cabinet pulls she had chosen. I had packed his belongings carefully, photographed each item, and placed everything in the front room so he could not claim I had damaged or hidden anything. Jocelyn stood beside the dining table with the deed, the inheritance record, and the notice canceling the installation. Grant looked at the old cabinet doors and demanded, "Why are those still here after I told you they were being replaced?" "Because this house is mine," I answered, placing the deed where both of them could read it. Jocelyn explained that Grant could document any contribution he believed should be considered during the divorce. But paying for repairs did not let him move Bridget in or remodel the property without consent. Bridget opened the complete agreement and asked why he had sent her only the page showing his pickup time. Grant turned toward her and muttered, "You wanted a deadline, so I gave you one." Bridget set the cabinet hardware on the table and reminded him that he had promised I would be gone before they returned. I did not defend her, because the order form and the samples proved she had helped plan the kitchen while my belongings were still inside it. Then Grant's phone rang, and his supervisor informed him that he was being removed from field inspections while the contractor emails were reviewed. Before he could finish that call, Bridget's manager contacted her and suspended her access to employee discounts until the cabinet order had been explained. Grant looked at me and accused me of destroying everything. But Jocelyn asked which message, order, or email I had written on his behalf. Bridget stared at the documents, then told him she would not risk her job for another version of the truth. She left alone, carrying her purse, but leaving the champagne and cabinet pulls behind. Grant finished packing under Jocelyn's supervision, then walked out when the agreed time ended. Before leaving, he looked down at the key still resting in his palm. It had opened the door exactly as promised, but only during the hours he had accepted in writing. He could enter the house, collect what belonged to him, and leave again, yet he could no longer decide who stayed. The key worked, but the life he had promised Bridget no longer did. The divorce took months, and every result came through records instead of one dramatic ruling. Grant submitted receipts for repairs he had paid toward, while I provided the deed, inheritance documents, and property tax records in my name. We agreed on fair credit for part of his contributions, but the house remained mine, and he withdrew his request to move back in. I refused to hand over what he had never owned. The county finished its review after interviewing Calvin Rhodes and comparing his email with Grant's inspection calendar. They found that Grant had crossed an ethics line by seeking favors from a contractor whose work depended on his approval. He was not fired, but he received formal discipline, lost field duties, and was removed from consideration for a supervisory position. Calvin kept his license because the records showed he never provided the discount. The showroom completed its review, and Bridget received a written warning for using an employee discount without the homeowner's consent. She kept her job, but her management application was withdrawn, and someone else took over approval of discounted orders. Bridget ended the relationship after Grant insisted she had pressured him into promises he could not keep. She never contacted me for forgiveness, and I never asked why she ignored the evidence inside my house. Grant asked to meet at a breakfast place downtown, and I agreed because the settlement was nearly finished. He stared at his coffee before admitting, "I thought you would give in because you always kept things calm." I reminded him that calm was never permission, then asked which choices belonged to him without Bridget. The county, or me carrying the blame. After a long silence, he answered, "I lied to both of you because the truth would have cost me the life I wanted." That was the first time he described what he had done without turning someone else into the cause. He signed the remaining papers, gave up any claim to return, and left the house behind. No one lost everything in one night, but none of us returned to the positions we held before the documents appeared. Every consequence remained tied to something real. After the divorce closed, I kept the cabinet doors my mother had chosen, but changed the walls, the table, and how decisions were made inside that house. Every repair came with a contract bearing my name. Every appointment came directly to me, and no one used borrowed authority to speak for me. Darlene still stopped by, and one evening she noticed I no longer looked toward the window when tires slowed outside. Jocelyn closed my file after the deed. Property division and obligations were settled. Grant rented an apartment and stayed on desk duty while rebuilding the professional trust he had damaged. Bridget remained at the showroom without authority over discounted orders, and she never returned to Grant. Calvin faded from the story after the records cleared him and his license remained untouched. No one was destroyed, but neither Grant nor Bridget kept the position that let them treat my home like a promise they could divide. Months later, I joined a weekend walking group and got to know a vocational teacher who had lived alone for years. He did not rush into my house, ask for a key, or treat patients like proof that I loved him less. One night after dinner, he walked me to the porch and waited until I invited him inside. Although I had offered him a spare key, I left that key in the drawer, and he smiled, because peace no longer required me to surrender control. The safest home is not the place where someone promises never to leave. It is the place where you no longer have to disappear so another person can feel larger. Tell me about the moment you stopped giving away the parts of your life others treated as automatic. Sometimes a quiet boundary is where a new life finally begins.